Hi. In this episode of Growing Your Sense of Self Through Self-Defense, we're going to do another exercise that is, I talked about 3 ways. In the introductory seminar, I talked about 3 ways of growing a sense of self. The standard talk therapy, the one we're largely going to be doing, which was identified as number 3, the generic top-down approach to growing a sense of self, that we're largely going to be doing in this program. But I also mentioned the second approach, which is a generic bottom-up approach to growing a sense of self. And that's to take the traits of a strong sense of self and a low sense of self and move them from the low sense of self, or wherever they fall in the lower sense of self column, to the stronger sense of self column. Now, the recommendation is to pick one of those and go ahead and work on it for a week or so and make conscious efforts to act your way into having a stronger sense of self related to that trait. Now, I don't know how you score yourself. However you score yourself, you can pick one of the ones that you say, well, I didn't do so well in this trait. I'm a little bit more on the lower sense of self side than I like to be. I'm going to focus on that one and try to get it over more towards the high sense of self side. Now, just for the purposes of this episode, I'm going to choose one that, you could work on something else instead of or in addition to, but I'm going to choose one. Some of them are difficult. So it's difficult to say start with openness. If you're very secretive, there's probably a lot of reasons why you're secretive, and to sort of take that one off out of the bottom that's holding up so many other traits, that might be too much to ask. So you might need to peel your way down towards that to move the secrecy over in a more open column. So I'm going to pick one that is not so, I think is not so having others dependent on it, and that's afraid of forming your own opinion and having it challenged. Now, if where you tend to present your opinions, if it's in a work environment, that's a very common place. I don't think we should do it this way. We need to worry about that, whatever. And maybe you tend to be quiet in those, or you tend to be hammer people with your opinion has to be the way things get done. That's another case of being afraid to have a challenge. What I suggest you do is take an idea that you've formed, your opinion that you've formed, and know that for different reasons why it's probably not the best position to have. That you already know that going forward. And what you do is you'll present that and see that others are willing to say, you know what, that's not a good reason, or not a good idea for these reasons. And see how that feels for yourself, sort of publicly being undercut, if you will, and with strong arguments, because you knew what the arguments were going in. And then you say, well, not for these reasons. So, all right, you really can't argue with that. Yeah, it wasn't that good an idea. And see how that feels. And then you can, in the spirit of openness, say, all right, yeah, I actually knew that going in, and I wanted to see, I was testing myself to see how comfortable I would be in public presenting an opinion that was going to be challenged, in a sense successfully challenged, that I have to back down from. If nobody, because your history is you're going to hammer on whatever it is you say, and people say, it ain't worth fighting a daggone guy. Whatever he says, yeah, okay, we'll go ahead and do that. And you already know it's not the best approach. You could try to tease people into saying why it's not the best approach. Give them some hints about it. And if people aren't taking that bait, that's saying a lot about the relationship you have with them, that people are not willing to challenge an idea that you know is not a particularly good idea. It's either saying that they're missing the obvious, or you've got a history of just pounding on people and they're not even going to challenge what you say, which is not a good place to be, right? The collection of people are always smarter than the individual. So if no one's picking up on any kind of leads you're giving or something, you could then say, look, I know there's problems with this. I was wanting to just see, I want it to be challenged. And then you can have the discussion of maybe why nobody challenged you and why that wasn't such a good idea. Give the reasons why it wasn't. So that's one of the traits that can be addressed that doesn't have a lot of dependencies on it, like something like secrecy does, or honesty does. If you try to go for one of those, that's a motherlode kind of a trait that a lot of things may depend on those, and it may just be too much to try at once. So this one's a little bit more on the peripheral, that you can see how well you can move that from the low sense of self trait column to the high sense of self trait column. So that's the exercise. You can post how things are going for you. If you chose a different trait and how that's working, use the comment section below. Thank you very much for your time. Toodles.